Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 6, season 1 of the Stand-Off here on New Zealand Sport Radio, your rugby league show of the year. And I'm joined here on every Wednesday with my colleague Brad Inger.
Good evening, Sanjay, and good evening to our listeners. We had some great games in round 8, and I look forward to talking about them tonight.
Yes, it was certainly a thrilling round with possibly one of the best games we've ever seen in a long time. So, yeah, no, it certainly was a humdinger of a round, and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, definitely. And now, while we're live here on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m, you can also catch our show via our podcast on iHeartRadio at your convenience.
Yeah, we'll be obviously covering the top stories of the week, a wrap-up of round 8, preview of round 9, and news from the UK Super League and in the women's game. So tune in and get your rugby league fix here on New Zealand Sport Radio. And let's crack into the top stories of the week, Brad.
Yeah, and the top story I think this week is Mark Robertson, the Warriors owner, discussing Warriors players' movements with the media before speaking to the players first. Ideally, it's basically about Blake Green this week. Obviously, Robertson came out prior to the game last weekend and said Green and Gerard Beale are gone. But he hasn't actually had any conversations with them yet. I know Blake Green was a bit upset. And personally, I don't like the look. I appreciate the honesty from the owner. It's good to know where they stand, but I think you need to talk to the players first before you start telling everybody on the planet, because this year's not really the best for players' well-being with all the situations they're in. That's really the last thing you need to throw on top of the pile. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I definitely don't. I don't agree with the way that they've handled it. It's unfortunate for the likes of Green and Beale to hear that. But thankfully for us on the weekend, it spiked something in Blake Green, and we got a good performance, probably his best performance. We'll come to that a little bit later on out of him. But yeah, it's definitely quite demoralising, I guess, as a player, to hear that from your owner and not having had it discussed with yourself first. So, yeah, definitely a poor move, I guess you could say, on Mark Robinson's behalf. But that's the way this club is going. That's the direction they're trying to, I guess, establish. And they're talking about making big noises this time with their selection policy in terms of the coaches and the player personnel. So let's see it. They're talking a big game. Obviously, hey, look, whether Blake Green and Gerard Beale deserve to be there next year, that's another question as well. I'm not saying that they definitely deserve to be there, but the way that it was handled could have, definitely been better. Definitely for morale in the camp at the moment. They're over there, they want to try and stay as positive as they can, and to hear that, I'm sure doesn't help the team, if anything.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something they're going to have to work on in the months going forward. And speaking of owners, we had the Broncos CEO held a press conference on Sunday and backed Anthony Seibold after their 6th straight loss, which we'll talk about a bit later. I guess the question is, how much longer does Seibold have? He's got a 5-year contract, which is causing the problems. During COVID, you're not getting a lot of money in due to not having a lot of fans at stadiums. They can't really afford to pay millions of dollars to see him out the door straight away. So I think that's saving him a bit. But then that's another look at the Broncos as a club of why would they sign someone for that long?
Yeah, probably the biggest talking point of the NRL over the last couple of weeks has been, obviously Anthony Seibold and the Brisbane Broncos. Yeah, it's unfortunate that they lost their 6th straight game, and like you said, we'll cover that a little bit later. But I just feel that the Broncos need probably some time more than anything if they're going to be able to, change this. Obviously, there's talks about changing personnel, but like you say, he's on a 5-year contract, so I think that you're going to see him there for at least 1 year. I don't think that they. If he's on a 5-year contract, to give up on him halfway through the first season, I doubt whether that's going to happen. So you'd have to imagine he's there for a year at least. And after a year, they've got time to reassess. So that keyword being time, because at the moment, everything's happening too quickly for the Brisbane Broncos, I feel. And they're just getting swept under with the tornado, really. It's not the players' fault. I reckon they're really trying. I think that, there are some positive signs there, but unfortunately, the stigmatism around the club at the moment, the reputation of the club at the moment. And I say at the moment because, they're a very proud club. So, yeah, we just have to wait and see. But we'll cover off a little bit about SIBO a little bit later as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then our next piece is about Adam Fanua-Blake. In his game this week, he actually got sent off after the final whistle for saying a slur to the referee, which I won't repeat here. He's been suspended, I think, 2 weeks, I think is the current call. I think the NRL are trying to push for more at the moment, but at the moment it's 2. His teammates have backed him. The CEO thinks it's a bit more than a simple sanction, and it's an interesting conversation piece, I think, on what they can do to make changes to how players behave.
Yeah, I think this has been thrown probably again way out of context. I believe. Like, look, he spat the dummy, and he was hugely disappointed in the result that should have gone their way. It's definitely worth a couple of games, I suppose, in the modern era. And they're talking about they don't want our kids to see that, and there's a lesson to be learned here for the community and the rest of it. I get all of that, but at the end of the day, he's got to be a professional on the pitch for 80 minutes, and unfortunately, he dropped his guard in relation to that, and he's come out and apologized profusely. He's actually apologized quite well, talking about if there's the whole team actually spoke up about it. To be honest, there was a few players that came to the party on this one, and they all said, look, if you want to send your kid down to where we train, we'll have a chat to them and say that what happened on the weekend wasn't right. So they have the community in mind with their apology, which is a genuine one at that. So get the suspension, get on with it, get him back in the side, because he's a hell of a player and we want to see him on the park. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'd have to say about that.
Yeah, take the lesson and move on. And that leaves us to our last top story, which is David Fifita. There's words about where he's going to go. Is he going to stay with the Broncos, or is he going to go to the Titans in 2021? For me, it's a hard decision to make because the Broncos aren't playing that well. The Titans seem to be building something, so I would tend to go that way. But he's going to be chased. I don't know if there's any club that wouldn't take him. So it's interesting that they're only talking about the 2.
Yeah, I from what I understand, and I could be wrong, I think that David may have played junior rugby league either in the Gold Coast. I think there's a suburb called Carrera or Canberra or something like that in the Gold Coast, and I believe he played there. Perhaps he's wanting to go home, so to speak. But I think he should 100% go to the Titans. I think the Titans have got something good. Look, they're disappointing on the weekend, and we're going to cover that a little bit later. But I think that they're missing just something like David Fifita. If they can get him as the marquee player as such, and they rally around him with what they've got over there, the resources that are there, which are promising resources at that, I think they could build something really, really strong next year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in relation to that.
Definitely. It's definitely a story that we're going to have to keep an eye on in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's going to be a key story for the Gold Coast. If they can secure his services, I think they'll go a long way to being competitive in the top 8, potentially for a few years at least. And then obviously they'd like to get better and have a crack at it. So we'll just have to wait and see. But in saying that, we'll crack into round 8 on Thursday night there, Brad.
Yeah, so on Thursday night we had the Storm defeat the Roosters 27-25, and probably the best game I've seen in some time. I've said it was grand final worthy, and yeah, I could really see this grand final night having this game played on replay and be completely happy. Thought it was a fantastic game to watch.
Yeah, probably one of the best games in the last 10 years. I'd say maybe even 15. You'd have to go back to, I think one of the best grand finals was that Benji flick pass grand final versus the Cowboys. That was definitely a good grand final. I also believe the North Queensland versus Brisbane one a few years back, where North Queensland prevailed, was also equally as good. And this game was right up there with, I feel like, those 2 games. There's been other good grand finals as well, there's no doubt. But this was a very, very close encounter. And, for the Roosters to be 10 points up with 10 minutes to go, and they were pulled back by Melbourne. That was really showed some character in the Melbourne Storm side.
Yeah, definitely. Cameron Smith was in the halves and played really well in the halves, even earning praise from Andrew Johns. He's in the game we'll talk about a bit later in the round 9 wrap-up. He's been put back into hooker, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him lurk out into the halves again. And Luke Keary and Ryan Pappenhausen played really well. And both reasonably young players, and in the clutch moments towards the end of normal time, they slotted field goals to try to win the game and then tie the game. So some great young talent that are showing they're capable of playing with the best.
Oh, definitely those field goals. One shot each. That's a pretty good success rate. 100% on field goals. That you see much worse than that in a typical game. So. Excellent, fantastic display of accuracy on behalf of those two lads. But in terms of the Roosters, in terms of the Storm, yes, Cameron did play at the halfback position in the first half, but it was when he played at the hooking position in the second half is when he really took it to the Roosters and tore them up the middle really. And he just methodically basically took the game away from them, and that is just still showing again the class of the man and how good he actually is. He's just getting better with age, really, and they certainly were physical. The Melbourne Storm, and they came away with the victory, a comeback victory against the Roosters. You would have thought early on that Melbourne were struggling after I think a couple of rounds we were talking about how they'd lost, I think, to the Raiders. I think they'd lost another game to someone in that top. I think it may have been the Knights. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think so, yeah. I had written them off. So
yes.
I said they couldn't play with the new rules, but they've proven me wrong.
Yes, well, we both have picked the Roosters for this game, hadn't we? It was the only one that we got wrong this week, and we'll cover that off in our picks a little bit later. But a very, very entertaining game of rugby league, very fast-paced, and definitely a good way to start the round off. And, we're pretty much halfway through the round robin, I guess you could say the round robin part of the tournament almost. We've got a couple of rounds to go. But, this Melbourne Storm, they're looking stronger and stronger over the last couple of weeks. And I'd say that they'll be thereabouts in terms of a minor premiership, I'd say.
So that will take us to Friday's first game, which was the Raiders defeating the Dragons 22-16. Probably a bit closer than Raiders fans would have liked, but I think they're starting to get on track, but there's still plenty of work.
Yeah, I think a good performance from the Raiders to come away with the 2 points. It wasn't anything special against the Dragon side, which I think is getting better. However, to only lose by 6 is a pretty good effort considering where the Dragons were a few weeks ago. I think that they are starting to show some real togetherness over there at the Dragons, under McGregor. So I think that they've sort of been away from the media over the last few weeks because of the way that they've been playing. And if they can continue playing this way, they'll definitely get some results. Wasn't enough. There was a late comeback, but it just wasn't enough, Brad.
Yeah, I think the Dragons, they need to focus on playing the whole 80. They seem to be, rather than fading away in the game, they do the opposite. They fade at the start and then find momentum and build towards the end. They just need to start straight out of the gates, and they could upset some teams going on. They're looking a lot better than they were like 3 weeks ago. The Raiders, definitely. On the other hand, though, they've got injury concerns, which I think's going to cause some hiccups for them. They lost Soyola, Elliot Whitehead, plus Corey Houseborough from a few weeks ago, Imrad Gula. There's a lot of forwards that they're losing, and they really need to keep all those forwards in there. So it'll be interesting to see how they go in the upcoming weeks until they get some of those big boys back.
Yeah, it was a good hour from the Raiders. They need to play the full 80, like you said. So I think they played really well for the 60-minute mark. And then basically, obviously due to injuries and just, general fatigue on the night, I think that they just let their guard down a little bit for the final 20. But a good game for the Raiders to win, I guess, because, at the end of the day, they could have lost that game and that would have been, disappointing for them. I'm sure Ricky's not overly excited about the performance that they had on the weekend, but he'll be happy that they've come away with the 2 points as they are in sort of rebuilding phase, a mini rebuilding phase, just to get them back on that track where they were late last year. So that leads us into the second game on Friday night, where we had the Eels thumping the Cowboys 42 points to 4, in what can only be described as a hiding, Brad.
Yeah, and it was Clint Gutherson's 100th game, and he's going from strength to strength. He had a good interview after the game where he said when he signed with the club, a lot of the fans didn't really want him there. He was playing on the wing and he was grinding away, and he's really become a keystone of this team. No Mitchell Moses, which was a huge concern, but Jai Field, who was originally a Dragon, had his debut for the club and played really well. They were hammering him, the Cowboys. They were pressuring him on the last tackles, but he just shook it off and kept going. And they got that little winger, Sivo. He's just going from strength to strength as well. 4 tries in this game. I don't know.
Big unit.
Yeah, I don't know how you stop him.
Well, he's got size, he's got speed, he's got explosiveness, and apparently he's a really humble lad as well. So he's definitely a find for them, and I think that he's going to definitely be a real weapon come the next few rounds, and particularly heading into the latter stages of the round robin series. So yeah, look, I think that the writing was on the wall for the Cowboys, who have now had I think a couple of really poor performances where they've lost quite heavily, and a lot of points have been scored against them. So they're on a dangerous road at the moment, the Cowboys, and they need to turn something around. But I guess when you have 4 straight sets on the Eels line and you don't look like scoring, I guess it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, they got no attack. They've got no defense at the moment. They've got a lot of work to do. I don't know how they're going to do it. They need to make changes. Don't know if it's a coach, if it's the roster. They just need to do something. They've got to go. They've got one of the best players in the game in Jason Tomalolo, but they need some other players around them.
Yeah, I just think for the Cowboys, they've just got to I think get that right edge sorted out where they're leaking a lot of points. I think they're very vulnerable when it comes to pace down that right edge, and Parramatta just had 22 offloads in the game. People were saying that this is similar to the Parramatta days when Jared Hayne was part of their 2009 team. So they've definitely struck some form. They're looking to be real contenders this year, and I think that they're going to be a very, very strong side throughout the duration of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are a grand finalist this year, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, definitely. And that takes us to our first game on Saturday, which was the Sharks defeating the Titans 40-10. I thought the Titans competed well in the first half, but the Sharks just came out in the second half like a brand new team and blew them off the park.
Yeah, this was a disappointing result from the Titans, particularly after the good work that they've done so far. And I would say in the first 7 weeks of rugby league play, obviously the season being interrupted by COVID-19, but in the first 7 rounds, they haven't won too many games, but they haven't lost by heaps, and they've always showed that pride and that effort. And, they still showed that the other day. Unfortunately, I guess this is just a bit more of a true representation of perhaps where the Titans are going to sit for a while, and in hopes of them getting better will have to be seen as a little bit slower than what we'd like. I do wish them well, and I really want to see them succeed, but in this performance particularly, you could see that the momentum they had built up over the last few weeks had just been lost completely.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit like we said with the Fafita thing. They just need like one of those star players to come in, and that might be like the final piece of the puzzle to help them get where they need to go. For the Sharks, though, their forwards dominated. Andrew Fafita had probably his best game in quite a while. Shaun Johnson, I think he was quite poor in the first half, but his second half made up for it tenfold. He got 2 try assists, but you could technically say 3 because he gave the Titans one with a poor pass that they ran the length of the field on. But he's definitely, after that criticism from Cooper Cronk, I think he's turned a corner and becoming quite a consistent footballer for them, and that makes the Sharks a dangerous team.
Yeah, he's gone from villain to hero, hasn't he? Shaun Johnson, and there's been quite a few things said about him over the last 4 weeks, with the first two of those weeks being fairly negative, and then over the last couple of weeks he's managed to pull it back and managed to play some of the football that we know Shaun Johnson for. And if he can continue playing like this, you're right, they will be a real bloody weapon, and they'll be really strong, particularly if him and Chad Townsend can get it going. And they got that speed around the ruck, so the go forward isn't too bad either. So I really see them as being able to compete with the best of them if they can just click week in, week out. That's the thing with Johnson, isn't it? We've always said it's about the consistency of performance. If he can keep that up and play consistently, play at the line, and make those kind of decisions late as he possibly can, I think that we'll see some good football out of this Shark side.
Definitely. And that leads us to the second game on Saturday, which was the Warriors defeating the Broncos 26-16.
Yes.
Really enjoyed this game. I thought both sides were desperate, and it showed with both sides making poor errors early on. Broncos took advantage of that, getting ahead 10-0. I started to get a bit worried sitting at home. The Warriors had some opportunities and just made some silly errors, but then Ken Mamalo got that try at halftime, and then second half, it was a bit like so many of these games this last round. Second half was a different story, and I think the Warriors just appeared to want it more, and that got them ahead.
Yeah, I think it was a very good performance from the Warriors, and I reckon it is one of the games of the season in a way. Yes, it was the two of the bottom tier teams playing against each other, but this was a good comeback from the Warriors because they were trailing for most parts of this game, and they only started to take the lead. I think 7 minutes or 8 minutes from the full time. Maybe 10 minutes. I think it was around the 10-minute mark where we scored the second to last try. I think it was a really, really good performance from the Warriors. Yes, it was against a beaten up Broncos side, but had we lost it, we'd be pretty much complaining about it right now and sticking the boot in as to why they didn't win it. So credit to the Warriors for getting the 2 points. I think that Blake Green probably had his best performance in a Warriors jersey. I think that has got to be, but is it too late? Why haven't we seen this over the last few years? Yes, there's been a lot of said about him this week in the media, and that's created a fire under him. But he should have had that desire and that passion, for the last 2 seasons. And if we'd played that way, then God knows where we could have been. But maybe it's too late.
I think it is a bit too little, too late. But I'm hoping that it's something he builds on for the remainder of the year with the Warriors, because I think if he can play like he did in that game for the rest of the year, the Warriors can be quite competitive.
But Brad, I don't think he might not last the rest of the year. There's word out that by the end of next week, he might want to just pack his bags and go. There's some speculation that he might just leave because he's been ill-treated. So we don't know. We're going to have to watch the space. It's a real interesting story, actually, because, he came out and played like that. I reckon he'll stay. He wants to prove a point. He's still contracted to the club to the end of the year. So if he can play like that and keep, that kind of attitude going, it can only mean good things for the Warriors.
Yeah, I feel he'll stay. I think if he can stay and keep playing well, it's just going to bump his price up for someone else. So it's probably in his best interest to stick around. At the moment, the only teams that would take him are probably the ones that aren't doing that well, which will bring your price down. So, but it's up to him. He's got a wife and kids. He's got to do what's right for him and his family. I feel for the Broncos, though, seeing their emotion at the end of the game. It took a bit of the joy away from the win for me, seeing how upset they were. I know the media have come out and said that they were crocodile tears and they were faking it. I don't think that's the case.
I don't believe. No, that's not the case at all.
Everyone seems to forget that the ones that were crying weren't the ones that were laughing last week. I think they're trying to put that together, like Isaac Luke was laughing and now crying. They had a picture of him at the end of the game. He was still smiling like he always does. But it's those Alex Glenn's and those key players that they've got at that club that are really hurting right now. They, as a club, they're quite a proud club. So I don't recall the last time they They lost 6 in a row.
They
Definitely
lost
not.
six in a row. They lost 6 in a row in 2012. And here's just a couple of interesting stats, actually. For the Broncos, they've been outscored 84-4 in the last 20 minutes of the 8 matches this year. So they've only managed to score 4 points, and they've conceded 84 in the last 20 minutes of the 8 matches this year. That's a huge back end of the game where they're not completing. And I think if they can look at that stat, they may be able to determine, what the issues are in terms of their attack in that last 20 minutes, because that attack in that last 20 minutes was woeful against the Warriors. They had us beat. Let's not kid ourselves. They were winning that game, and I mean, I'm really glad that the Warriors came back and won it. But did Brisbane lose it? That mistake by the little halfback fellow just with minutes to go, they still had a chance then. A few little errors earlier, letting the try in on the 10-minute mark. And the 40-20, I guess that was just an exceptional play and one of the plays of the season, really, that 40-20, to really turn your team around and win it from there. That turned out to be pretty much the play of the game, really. So, look, Mamala also, I think, he looked pretty strong on the weekend. 291 run meters, 2 line breaks and 2 tries. So, a really, really good performance from him. I just hope that he doesn't come home.
Me too. I think for the Broncos, I think it's just a lack of self-belief. I think were in the hunt, but every time there was a little error or something went against them, they just dropped their heads and fell apart. And I think that's what's happening in the final 20. The closer they seem to get to victory, the further they get away from it at the same time. I don't know. They need to make some changes. I know Michael Innes has called for Corey Parker to be head coach. I know last year he was coaching the Broncos women's team, so he's getting some experience there. He's a very smart footballer. Could be an interesting thing to go, but it's that money that they've tied up.
With the Corey Parker thing, I think that basically they're trying to go for someone who's got a lot of respect as a player in recent times. He's got a lot of respect as a human, as a personality. He's a big personality. He's a big Broncos personality at that. And so I think that's where they're trying to, just discussions at this stage, but that's general consensus is they need someone like that after the Seabold shambles. But again, I mean, you've got him for 5 years, so what do you do? They're in that predicament, so we'll have to just wait and see what happens. But 6-0, they're just like, they're at all sorts. And unfortunately, but if you have a look at the 6 teams that they've lost to, they've lost to the Eels, Roosters, Eagles, Knights, Titans, and us, the Warriors. So you could have argued that, they may have won 3 of those 6 games. So yes, they've lost 6 in a row, but they've played some of the top teams in the competition.
Yeah, I think really the only games out of that lot that they typically should have won was against the Titans, against the Warriors. I think the other 4, they were always going to lose anyway. But they need to win this week, which we'll talk about obviously later on. They cannot go 0-7, otherwise I don't know what will happen. The CEO can't keep coming out after every loss and saying we're still backing the coach, because they need to make changes if they don't get the results on the field. So
it could be none from 10. Wouldn't that be a disaster for the Brisbane Broncos? That would be a terrible stat. And I wouldn't know how far you'd have to go back. And if it's ever been done in the club's history, I doubt it. I don't think they would have ever lost 10 games in a row. So we have to be interesting to see that mark if we get to it in the next couple of weeks. But we wish the Broncos all the best. We know they're under the pump and they're a fantastic and proud club, and I'm sure that they'll be back.
Definitely. That leads us to the next game of the round, which was the Panthers defeating the Tigers 19-12. Was definitely a very physical game with heaps of niggle. I thought the Panthers looked good with Nathan Cleary and Jerome Luai building a good partnership, but it was really Cleary that was the difference. For a player so young, the way he can control the game is amazing. He just seems to be playing like a Cooper Cronk that's been there forever and ever and ever, that just knows how to direct the game. And I think the problem with the Tigers is they just lack execution, which I think may need to bring in Benji Marshall back into the fold just to do something.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad call actually there. I reckon they had a pretty good game against very much an informed Panthers lineup. And I think that, pardon me, I think that, Cleary and Jerome, just illustrating, how good they are together. It was a fantastic performance, but you got to give your take your hat off to Api Carousel. Again, he set up the match-winning try, 50-plus tackles. I don't think he missed one, and he's just playing with pace up the middle of the ruck and just tearing teams apart. And he is the buy of the season for me.
100%,
so
100%.
He has definitely got a huge part to play in their success thus far, and a good win from the Panthers as well, because the Tigers are showing a bit of form over the last couple of weeks, and they're showing that defensive Maguire style. So they're starting to really become used to that. I think you're right, though. You're bringing back the likes of Benji will pay dividends for them, particularly after they've lost, Leilua to miss 4 weeks, isn't it, for a dangerous contact charge.
He's an interesting player. I think he's a very good player when he's focused, but his discipline is what costs him. He just has brain snaps. I don't know how to explain it. What he did in that game, there was no need for it. I know he was a bit upset with his brother getting a bit of a hit to the head from Carousel in a completely accidental situation, but then he comes out and nails Dylan Edwards with a clothesline, basically, when he didn't even have the ball.
It was terrible. It was a terrible act, really. It just shows, his ill discipline at times. He's a great player. He's played international football, hasn't he, as well? So, and just disappointing that he had to sort of act that way. I mean, we talked about earlier on, with the spray that Adam gave the referee the other night. Well, this guy here, he wasn't too far away from a similar charge, and they'll probably see it around the same sort of weeks on the sideline as a result. Ill-disciplined, but an entertaining game, to be honest. Western Sydney derby, I thought it was a fantastic rugby league game. Even after leading 10-6 at half time, ill-discipline and emotion cost them in the end, the Tigers. So, they'll learn to play better next week, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing to talk about where the media's grabbed a bit of a hold of it was Ivan Cleary blowing kisses to a Tigers fan that was giving him a bit of stick. The fan in question's actually come out and apologized to Cleary. Apparently, it was quite a very horrible sledge he was giving Cleary on the sidelines, and Cleary, that was why Cleary blew the kiss back. I don't think it's much of a deal. It seems like the Tigers and the fan have moved on.
It's no big deal. It's no big deal there, man. It's just like, it's just one of those things. Just, it was a bit of fun that he was having. Obviously, like, he was at the Tigers, and that's when he was negotiating to come back to the Panthers. So the Tigers fans see him as a bit of a kick in the pants. Is what he's done to that club, really, because they really wanted him to stay potentially. So, but hey, they're doing okay under Michael Maguire, and I think that there's better things to come for the Tigers.
Definitely, that leads us to Sunday's first game, which was the Knights defeating the Sea Eagles 14-12 in quite a contentious decision, I guess it's fair to say. I think the Knights showed some great heart with defence. They were out on their feet, but they would not let the Sea Eagles through. What were your thoughts on the game before we talk about the final minutes?
Yeah, a gutsy performance from the Knights and a rare win on the Northern Beaches. They don't go to Manly very often and win with 15 players for the majority of it as well. That was a very good win for them. They're bouncing back after the previous week. Obviously, they lackluster performance where they lost, and they thought they'd go up north and get the 2 points quite easily last week, and it didn't happen. So, Andrew McCulloch, he had a fantastic game. 48 tackles, a try, and a try-saving tackle in the end goal area as well. So that was a extraordinary effort from him. But yeah, errors and discipline hurt Manly.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was their biggest issue was just their the errors in their discipline. I don't know. That's all stuff that you can easily fix, but they've now got no Tom Trbojevic. Dylan Walker's still gone. Fanua Blake's added to the list of people that can't come back, it's going to be a tough road until they get some players back. But they've got some good depth there.
No, definitely. We've got a question here from Jordan. He's asking, evening boys, did the TMO ref get it right with the final call in the Manly Knights game? Well, we're just going to come to that. And I would have to say that the TMO got it horribly wrong in this case, and it cost Manly the game. And it's the second time it's happened for them this season. They've been robbed twice. They were also robbed versus the Eels, and they would have got the 2 points on this occasion as well. So 4 competition points potentially lost as a result of bad calls.
Yeah, see, I'm on the other side of the fence. I think it was fine. So,
right. Okay.
I think he was already committed to the tackle. Wingers generally aren't the best tacklers in the game, so when they're on the sideline, they try to push, which is what happened there. I would be happy either way. So. I'd be happy either way. If it was a Warriors team and that had happened, I would probably be on your side of the fence. But it's I wouldn't want to be a Manly fan right now, like you said, with those 2 calls in those 2 games.
That's potentially a penalty try as well. Like, they didn't go down the penalty try route on the weekend, and I thought they may have a look at that. But yeah, that's definitely a penalty, if not anything. And I think they got the penalty, didn't they? Did they get the penalty? No. So, for them to not get the penalty as well, just shows that, that was the wrong decision.
We have to agree to disagree.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that, whatever happens out of this game, you'd have to say that, they're still showing quite a bit of fight, Manly. But, yeah, the Knights definitely looking like they'll be a contender in that top 6, I'd say.
Yeah, top 6. And that will lead us to our last game of the round, which was the Rabbitohs defeating the Bulldogs 26-10. I think the Bulldogs had plenty of opportunities to stay in this game. They just lack execution. But I think the biggest thing they can take away from this game is they're trying. I think there was almost a length of the field try towards the end of the game, and there was about 3 Bulldogs players still running the length of the field trying to chase, I think it might have been Alex Johnson down. So with the game basically over, they were still trying to get there and try to stop it, where a lot of teams would have just pulled up and gone, oh, no, you got that one, we'll be ready.
Yeah, no, they're not being criticised for the lack of effort. Unfortunately, this Bulldog side, poor recruitment and form over the last 3 years, really. They really need some players in key positions, and any potential recruits, potentially Adam Bateman has been suggested as a possible recruit for their club. They'll need to know who the coach is going to be, though. And when you don't know who the coach is going to be next season, it makes it very hard to want to go to a club or for them to attract players, with the current players there to stay. Even Adam Elliott, like, he's so unhappy, so disappointed. He's the heart and soul of the club currently. If he goes, what will they be left with? He's basically, the soul of Belmore at the moment. So everyone needs fans, members, possible recruits, current players. Everyone's looking for answers at the Bulldogs because of one victory this season now.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if they'll get many more. But yeah, the Dean Pay situation, he's off contract at the end of the year. They really need to either say we're sticking with him or we got this guy coming in, because you're not going to lure those big names to the club if you don't know who your coach is going to be. So they need to make a decision and announce it sooner rather than later. Otherwise, next year will be a write-off as well.
I think they should just stick with Dean Pay for the season. That's, I guess, the Warriors. Let's have a look at the 3 clubs that are planning to do something. You had basically McGregor earlier. You've got Dean Pay. You've got Adam Seibold, and you've got, the situation that the Warriors situation has occurred. We've got Payton for the rest of the year. That's set in stone. So we were the first club out of those 4 clubs there to do the mid-season thing. And, is that going to be a right move? Is that going to be a wrong move? So the other clubs, I think, they're a bit more cautious, and they might be like, well, look, let the year go. We've had an interrupted year at that. It's a shortened season. Numbers have been low in the stands as a result of COVID. So we'll just wait until next year. But it'll be interesting to see for those other 3 clubs what they do. And for the Bulldogs, I think It's gonna take some big signings, because at the moment, yeah, like you say, I don't see too many more victories for the rest of the season. I wish them well. They're a strong club. Chris Anderson at the head of the organization. So they're a very proud club as well. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. So that brings us to the end of the round. If you want to bring up the table, there we go. So we've got, Eels, Panthers, Storm, and Knights in the top 4, with the Roosters, Raiders, Sharks, and Tigers hitting the 5th to 8th position. So not really much change. It's still, I think the Rabbitohs dropped out. Weren't they in the top 8 last week? I think
that they were on the fringes of the 8. I think maybe Sea Eagles, how many points have they got? Because they had the same amount of points and they lost to the Knights. I think they may have been up there. But irrespective of that, I guess, you've got your top 4 there. You've got your Eels, Panthers, Storm, and Knights. I think you could probably put the Roosters up there instead of the Knights, and you could potentially have the best 4 teams in the comp, I would say. The Eels, followed by the... I don't know if they'd be in that order, but the Eels, Panthers, Storm, and Roosters, those 4 would make up your top 4. It'd be interesting. You'd probably have to have the Melbourne Storm. I think Eels deserve to be in first place, but you'd have Melbourne up there, I'd say, and potentially the Panthers 3rd, and maybe the Roosters 4th. I don't know, but the Roosters, they could be first. So it's a very, very tight competition at the top of the table there.
Yeah, I think those 4 teams you mentioned are the ones towards the end that will be there. What order they're in, I'm not sure, but they will be the top 4. In terms of the bottom 8, the Rabbitohs, Seagulls, Cowboys, then the Warriors, Dragons, Broncos, Titans, and then Bulldogs dead last. I don't know how many of those teams could push it. When you look at it feasibly, I think it's the Warriors and up are just 2 points out of the 8. Does that mean they could get in? Don't know with how everyone else is going, but yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'd say the Rabbitohs might be the only team that could squeeze into the 8 out of the bottom 8 right now, with all the injuries going to the Seagulls.
But yeah, I don't know. I tend to disagree. I reckon it's really close until around round 15, 16, 17, I reckon, because there's 20 rounds this year. So the way that I look at it, the difference between a top 8 side and where the Warriors are is 2 points. And the difference between 13th place Dragons and Broncos and 14th place is 4 points difference. So it's only 2 victories. So, yes, the games are running out. But I would say that, yes, I'd probably say that there are 12 possible contenders for the top 8, including the Warriors as of now. And that's been kind, I think, as well. I think, I think later on I may regret to have said that. I'll still say that, there's 12 possible spaces for the 8. I think the Dragons, they're just 1 game too many away now to possibly get there. But I still think, I reckon anyone from the Rabbits down to the Warriors could potentially still make the 8.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And then I guess we go straight into our picks. Not really much to say. We had the exact same picks and we only got 1 wrong, which was
before we move into picks, we have a question from the live chat, and Simon was asking you, what do you think of the new Super League's rule about no scrums?
We're going to mention that a little bit later on, but we can hit it now. I don't like it. It's not a big deal because there's not too much technical nous in the scrum and league nowadays, but they want to do it as a way to stop or help prevent COVID, but it's in a game where you're tackling everybody. So you're still getting that contact. And I like how a scrum pulls all the forwards into the center or wherever you're going to have your scrum and allows the backs to create gaps and make some exciting plays. So I like the scrums there, but it's, they've put it in stone. It's no scrums for the rest of the year for the Super League.
I think it's not a good decision for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the new tap restart rules in terms of the penalties, the 6 again rule, and now the scrum removal, that's going to create injuries in itself. These players, the scrum is looked at as an opportunity in rugby league, really, for the forwards to have a bit of a breather, if anything. It might be a 10-second breather at that. But you say that the league scrum is not tactical anymore, Brad. But the good thing about still having the scrum is you can make it tactical if your forward pack has enough energy. Like if you're 1 point down in a grand final and you've got a scrum on their line, you better believe that even in a rugby league game, you're going to try and push that scrum over to get the ball back. So you're taking that element out of it as well, which I think is not good for the game. I mean, you've got to leave the traditional parts of the game the way they are. You don't tamper with the genuine traditional parts of the sport.
Yeah. Guy, I guess finally, do you know anything about the domestic rugby league structure in New Zealand? Is it going to be a nationwide competition? Have you heard anything along those sort of grounds?
I know the Barter Card's currently going. I think they started back last week or the week before. I don't know exactly how well it's going, but I know they've started at least. So yeah, I think all the competitions are back, a bit like club rugby in that they're all slowly getting everything back.
I know the Auckland Rugby League competition is back, but I'm wondering if there's going to be a national one as well.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm not sure.
They had in New Zealand the grassroots rugby league tournaments, the Fox Memorials, and the one that Brad mentioned there. Those ones there, the Barter Card. Yeah, so those have generally been the competitions that are in place. Years ago, they did have a Lion Red Cup, which I believe was nationwide, and it consisted, I think, of around 12 teams. They tried to emulate a Winfield Cup type competition, and we simply don't have that kind of depth to run a nationwide competition like that one. People will remember it, though. Listeners will probably remember it as well. They did try, but unfortunately, there just wasn't enough player depth in the nation to do that.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So going back to our picks there, Brad, you're at round 8, of course, 7 from 8 for each of us. So basically that sees us at 27 out of 40 correct picked so far this season, both at neck and neck. And of course, I've given you a bit of an opportunity there to go one up on me by having to take the risk as always. But I'm willing to do so in our round 9 picks, which we'll get to in just a moment. But we'll just cover round 9 off. On Thursday night, we've got the Cowboys versus the Roosters. Roosters paying $1.20 versus the Cowboys, who are on a downward spiral at the moment. I think there's going to be no surprises on this one, Brad.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the Roosters. If the Cowboys manage to get a win here, they should go buy lotto tickets, really, realistically speaking.
Definitely. Yeah, and then taking us into the first game on Friday night, we've got the Titans versus the Warriors. It's going to be an absolute cracker, I reckon. Titans playing well. Yes, they got thumped last week. Warriors had a good performance against Brisbane. I'm backing the Warriors in on this one. I think they'll be a little bit too strong for the Titans, who I feel just took a step backwards last week, Brad.
Yeah, I'm backing the Warriors too. Titans, they lost some senior players to injuries, so I think definitely I'm edging on the Warriors side here, but I think it'll be a really good game to watch. And that leads us to the next game on Friday night, which was the Rabbitohs paying $1.48 to play the Tigers $2.65 at Bankwest Stadium. I've gone with the Rabbitohs here. I think the Rabbitohs, they've been a bit patchy, but I think they're going to have enough to get past the Tigers. What about you?
I'm going to Tigers on this one. I thought about it, Brad. I could have gone the traditional route and go with the odds on, but once again I've put in a predicament where I've got to try and get in the lead. So I am going to go for the Tigers, who I think have shown some really good form over the last couple of weeks, albeit in losing performance against the Panthers. They did have a really good performance prior to that, so I think that the Tigers are looking pretty strong after that pretty solid defensive effort really against the Panthers. Yes, they conceded 19 points, but this Panthers outfit, the way that they're running around the ruck there, you would have potentially expected more. So definitely picking the Tigers to win this one, and we'll have to just see who comes out on top there, Brad.
Yeah, definitely make the difference of the round for sure. And that will take us to Saturday's first game, which is the Sharks paying $2.65 against the Panthers, who are paying $1.48. This one here, I've gone with the Panthers. I know the Sharks look good in that second half, but I think the Panthers have been one of the form teams in the past couple of rounds.
Oh, definitely. We're talking about the Panthers at the top 4 side. I think the Sharks also have been playing well. They are playing really good football, but they're not going to be playing. They're not playing as good as what the Penrith Panthers are, and they're just starting to find some of those elements that work for them, the Sharks. So whilst they're on the up and up, I don't think that they're at that top 4 competing level, and I would suggest that if they're coming across any of those 4 sides at the moment, that they'd probably go down. It's not to say that they won't get better and gel in the next 5, 6, 7 games and be competitive at the back end. They are premiership winners from a few years back, so they've got some personnel there that have got a point to prove. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens on that one. But leading into Saturday night's fixtures. Following that, we have the Broncos versus the Bulldogs. The Broncos at $1.62 versus the last place Bulldogs. No surprises here. You'd expect the Broncos to be able to change that losing streak, Brad.
Yeah, if there's any time for the Broncos to start winning games, it's against the Bulldogs. So I've backed the Broncos here, and I hope
poor old Bulldogs.
Yeah, I hope for my pick's sake that they get the win, and I hope for the players' sake they get a win as well. I know the Bulldogs are hurting too. But the Broncos, they've got to get a win here. Otherwise, I'm scared for what's going to happen to them for the rest of the year.
Yeah, look, we'll just have to wait and see. I think that the Broncos, it's not going to be an easy win. They're trying to play hard for Dean Pay. All the other teams have sort of managed to have something to celebrate for their efforts in a disappointing way, but except for Dean Pay and Anthony Seibold. So we'll just have to wait and see for that one. But following that, we've got the Raiders versus the Storm, which promises to be probably the match of the round potentially as well. The Raiders paying $1.80 there at the Storm's $2. So it's interesting to see the Raiders up at GIO Stadium on the odds there. But with the way that Melbourne's been playing, I wouldn't have thought that, Brad.
Yeah, the Raiders are generally really hard to beat in Canberra. So I think that's why they're the favourites here. But I think the Storm, after that game against the Roosters, they know how to come back from tough situations. They're currently not allowed to be in Melbourne, so every game's an away game for them, so that's not going to faze them, and I think they're going to come away with the win.
Yeah, I think they'll win that one as well, personally. So we'll just see how good the Raiders can play at home against the Storm outfit. That will be a real test of how good the Raiders are this season. If they can pull off a victory here and to go off their win against the Dragons, start building some momentum back potentially. So that promises to be the game of the round for mine. And on Sunday we have the Knights going up against the Eels. The Knights paying $2.40 to the Eels $1.57. The first place Eels. I've got the Eels for this one. I think that they'll be too strong for the Knights, but it also promises to be one of the games of the round.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great game, but yeah, I think the Eels to be too strong and will come away with a win here. Don't know if it'll be by much, but they'll definitely get the W.
And that leads us into the final game of the round, which sees the Dragons play the Sea Eagles. I was also tempted to sort of pick the Dragons on this one, but I just think the Sea Eagles will come away with it. I'd hate to be proven wrong, because there was something saying to me that, pick the Dragons. They'll be up for this one, particularly with, Fanua Blake going to be now not playing, the injury concerns that Manly do have, Travojevic, etc. So you could have gone the Dragons here, who Ben Hunt and co are starting to make some inroads into a system, I guess, of play on the field. So, but anyway, we've gone with the Sea Eagles. So obviously our round 9 picks are pretty much consistent across the board, except for the fact that I'm picking the Tigers and Bradley is going for the Rabbitohs there. So we'll have to see what happens in that one, Brad.
Definitely. So we'll actually have someone in the lead this time next week. So it'll be interesting to see which one of us gets ahead.
Well, it will be interesting, but I mean, I'm taking the most risks at the moment, so I'm playing the game, So I genuinely do believe that the Tigers have a really good chance against those Rabbits. So, and in Super League news, we have a restart has been threatened by a pay issue. Only 3 teams believed to have reached agreements on reduced wages. Well, that's a very disappointing amount, and looks like we're going to have a bit of a delay there, Brad.
Yeah, so they're hoping to get it all sorted quickly. Hull FC have led the way. They actually got an agreement with their players done a few weeks ago, so they're all ready to go. But it's they're asking for pay cuts, and the players aren't that interested. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that does push the start out a little bit. As mentioned in our question section, the scrums have been removed when the season does restart, and they're incorporating the 6 again rule that the NRL have used. But yeah, I guess the big question is going to be when's it actually going to start now if they don't get the payment stuff sorted.
Yes, we'll keep you updated on that as well throughout the course of the season. So, but in the women's game, Slade Griffin has been named the Warriors women's team coach.
That's right. Yeah, so we've actually finally got some women's news for a while. We've had not much, unfortunately, but yeah, Slade Griffin's been named the team coach for the Warriors women, which I don't know much about him on a coaching level, but I know he was brought into the club to help with building the culture and working with the younger players. So it's good to see him get an opportunity. I know Justin Morgan was working with them a lot, but he's working with the top side now. So we'll see what that means for the women's team, to see if that takes them to the next level when their competition starts.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see. And that about wraps everything up for another episode here on the Standoff with Sergeant Brad. Thank you for joining us this evening, ladies and gentlemen. We really appreciate your time. And for your weekly news, please do catch up with us here at on Facebook or via our podcast there.
Yeah, so just remember on the podcast to go on iHeartRadio and just search for New Zealand Sport Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.